Hello and welcome to another episode of Calm the Conflict, the Art of Resolution podcast with myself, Zakia, and
David Goldberg. Hi, so I'm a mediator accredited by CEDR, ADR Group and Legal 500.
And in this episode, we are going to be looking at, is mediation really worth it? David, I want your take as a mediator, but also as a lawyer, because that is also part of what you do. You're also a solicitor. So tell us from both sides, from the mediator side and from the solicitor side, do you think it's worth it?
Okay, well, I've obviously got a slight bent here, haven't I? A bit of a bias. But statistically, absolutely it works. The success rate is recorded by, I think CEDR do some stuff on their website and stuff, and other places do. So it's definitely a successful process. In my personal experience, I have done dozens and dozens of mediations, and a handful have not worked. And the reason they've not worked is because one party or other is just not interested, not engaged, or the figures just didn't get there in the end. Although I know one of them did keep talking. And the other one that didn't work was sort of a neighbour boundary dispute where we couldn't quite get over the line on certain things. But does it work? Yes. From personal experience, it very much is the case.
Yeah, and I agree with you, because my own personal experience in getting parties to mediate with an independent mediator and in mediations myself, it works. What I find is actually the smaller sums, because I do quite a lot of small claims mediations, and actually those are trickier than the really, really large, big numbers that you deal with, like the 100,000, the £1 million claims. The smaller ones are always so much more difficult. Why?
The $1 million question. It is
we
more
argue over literally a couple of £100 sometimes, some of these small claims mediation matters, or under 5,000, under 10,000. And I just think, why are these parties arguing over this? Especially when, like I said, the evidence is pretty black and white. And I know that's not part of mediation. And even the small claims mediator, they don't care about that bit. They just want to know what your offer is. But they're so much more tricky to settle.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I've not mediated a small claim mediation because it's not commercially viable for me to do it. But you're absolutely right. The lower the value, the harder it is to find a settlement, because different parties, different financial positions. If it's a large corporate entity, there's money, they can find money, they can address money in other ways. So it is more tricky. So wearing my lawyer's hat, the answer is, sometimes does it work? You've got to sell the whole concept of upfronting money to have a mediation where people are not necessarily comfortable with it. Most sophisticated clients now are comfortable with mediation, understand how it works. But the first time, you're saying to your client, we've got a claim of, doesn't matter, X hundreds of thousands, it's going to cost 10 grand for a day. You've got your mediator's fee, you've got our fees, you've got...
And they're already out of pocket.
They're already out of pocket. Things are running along, legal fees are ticking up in the background. There might be a court date that's imminent. They may be forced to be going into it because directions say you've got to mediate, or they're looking at direction questionnaires where they've got to tick a box and say, have you or won't you, or will you or won't you?
Yeah.
And you've then got to sell that to a client. So I appreciate entirely when I'm litigating, I'm saying to a client, let's front load these, let's have this. Is it going to work or isn't going to work? And the answer is, from my perspective, it's a great process. Your experience is success, generally speaking.
Generally very successful.
So there we have it. So it's definitely worth giving it a go.
I say to my client, do you want that money in your back pocket today, or do you want to wait 12 to 18 months, generally, because that's how long the court process takes, if not longer. 2.5 years at the moment, I think it is, for a multi-trial date. So that's why I encourage mediation, to let's settle this early on and move on. But with does mediation work? We've both come to the conclusion, yes, it does.
Yep.
But what about those that think actually it doesn't work for whatever reason? What sort of myths are around mediation? What would put someone off doing mediation, apart from the big thing, which is the money, like you said, uploading it?
Well, I think one of the concerns that people have is, if we're going to go to mediation, we're going to start disclosing stuff that we don't need to disclose, which is why I encourage very early on explaining. So a mediation agreement is signed that identifies confidentiality, my independence, my confidentiality, and the whole process. So the point is, if party A makes an offer that is out of the ballpark, and party B laughs at it, fine. That's the process, but at least get that rolling. And I think the misconceptions historically used to be greater. It was a bit touchy-feely, be hands-on-y, no, we don't want to disclose confidential information. We don't want to be the first one to blink. It's a load of money. I don't want to be in a room with them, which we've discussed on previous podcasts. I think now people are far more comfortable with the whole concept of mediation. They understand it does work, and you've also got to pick the right mediator for the parties.
I think we're going to look at that. Absolutely. I think you hit that on the head, because I think even for lawyers, whilst they may know how to pick a mediator, I think there's always something from the mediator's side, from your sort of brain, in sharing a little bit more about actually potentially this is how you could choose a mediator. So we'll discuss that on another episode. But I want to just wrap up this discussion about, does mediation work? Any final thoughts?
No, it works. From my personal experience, it works statistically. And as long as the parties come into the mindset of, let's get rid of this, let's share the pain, no winners, no losers, as I've said before, bosh, we should be able to get this over the line.
Thank you very much, David. So yes, join us again on another episode when we'll be discussing more about what goes on inside David's head as a mediator, not just a lawyer. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. This podcast was brought to you by Right Here Creative, a video creative agency based in Oxfordshire. Check them out at rightherecreative.co.uk.